Good evening, everyone. I know it's 6 o'clock, but given that we are in the middle of a nice little snowstorm, and of course, being Netherlands, we're going to give a few more minutes here for latecomers to arrive before we start this informational session. So hang tight, and we'll be back with you guys all soon. Thanks. All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6:04 p.m. by my clock, so I think we should get this started. We've got a nice group of people in the room. We've got a full room, and I know we have a lot to get through in the next 2 hours. So I want to welcome everyone to this informational session. I want to start by really thanking everyone who's come out this evening, both everyone who's online to listen to this, and also everyone who's reached out over the last few weeks with questions. So really, this is an opportunity, ever since last fall, when notice of the cease and desist order was made public and people in the area started contacting us. I know the Board of Trustees got a lot of questions. I know I did. And we tried to answer as many of them as we could from the point of the town. But obviously, the Cross and Caribou Mines are not in the town of Nederland. They're in Boulder County. So I'm really appreciative to Boulder County, who's come out this evening to hear from both the residents of Nederland and the greater Peak to Peak region, because I know there's a lot of questions people have, a lot of concerns, a lot of people want to just be heard. And that's what this evening is about. This is a chance for us to talk to the county and for the county to answer some questions. So I want to thank the county for coming up. I know we've got at least a couple members here from the Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting Office. And what we're going to do is we're going to have Jesse Rounds, the senior planner from that office at the county, is going to give a little quick presentation, a 15-minute presentation to get everyone on the same page with regards to the county's position on the mine, what's happened in the past, and where things stand currently. And then we're going to open this up to questions, and we're going to do that in a way that, because we figured we're going to have a big room tonight and we're still stuck in COVID Zoom world, we've collected several dozen questions from locals in the last few weeks, and our town administrator, Miranda, has collated those into a list of about 24 questions, broken into different categories. She's going to ask those of Jesse and the county and hopefully get answers. You may not hear your exact wording of the question you submitted because so many questions had similar themes, similar questions. So we've tried to merge them in. If two questions were very closely aligned, we changed the language a little bit to answer both of them in one question. This is a fairly large meeting and we have a lot to get through, so we have muted everyone this evening. Except for the presenters. We've also turned off the public chat. We have left open the Q&A because in the unlikely event we get through all the questions that were submitted, we're going to throw this open to public comment and video and audio public comment, kind of along the lines of our usual town board meetings. You'll get 3 minutes. That you guys probably know the drill well enough from our bot meetings. But in the event we don't get to that, because we do have a hard cutoff at 8, if we get to 8 and we haven't gotten to public comment, you can submit things during the evening. In the Q&A, it'll go directly to the moderator, and those questions may be rolled into additional questions asked this evening, or if not, they aren't something that we can get to, we can do follow-up later. So without any further ado, you didn't come here to listen to me. I want to turn the floor over to Jesse Rounds, that senior planner from the Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting Office. Jesse, thank you for coming up the mountain, at least virtually during a snowstorm, and look forward to hearing from you this evening. Thanks.
Thanks so much. I hope everyone can hear me, and I really appreciate the invite to come in and talk to you about what's happening up at the mine and what's going to happen in the future. So without further ado, I should also mention that I'm joined by my colleague Erin Dodge, who's the Water Quality Program Coordinator for Boulder County Public Health in their Environmental Health Division. So she's going to be presenting as well, and then we'll work together to answer questions as we go along. But without further ado, I'm going to share my presentation here. Hopefully, let's see if I can make it work. Are you all seeing my notes slides or my actual slides?
We're seeing your slides, Jesse.
All right, excellent. Thank you. It's always an adventure. So again, we're here to talk about the Caribou and Cross Mine water quality violation status, both the current or the events that led up to where we are now, and also the future. And we really want to focus at the end on the best people to contact if you have questions, concerns, complaints in the future. Then we're happy to answer the questions that have been sent in, and then if we have time, any other questions. So just to jump in, so I'll talk a little bit about the violation timeline, a little bit about the current status. Then Erin will present a little bit on public health and their role. I'll talk about our oversight in community planning and permitting, and then we'll get into the future and questions as well. So I didn't want to get into a ton of detail on the violation timeline, except to say that, the Caribou and Cross Mines have had various small water quality permitting violations throughout its history, which goes a long time, goes back quite a ways. In 2019, there was an ownership transition. And then in 2020 and 2021, there were a number of violations that occurred of their water quality permitting. And then last year, as mentioned, there was a violation letter issued by both the Water Quality Division of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and the Department of Reclamation and Mining Safety. And both those letters came with, one letter came with the possibility of a cease and desist order, and the other one also did actually enforce a cease and desist, but only of activities that require, or a cease and desist of their water management as they tried to figure out what to do. So I'll get into a little of those details later. But I think that timeline and how the cease and desist orders worked is very important to what happened at the end of last year. And that's why I wanted to highlight that. So where are we now? The water treatment plant or water treatment filtration system has been installed. The owner of the mine, Grand Island Resources, proposed a system, had it installed, and has been operating it. And they're testing the efficacy of that. And our state partners are reviewing the results of those tests to assess whether the system is working. And what they do is each month they send in the data, and those state agencies then get a chance to review that and see if everything is working. While they're doing this, the state is continuing to monitor compliance. In terms of fines and sort of the larger process, in December of last year, the DRMS, the Division of Reclamation and Mining Safety, held a board meeting, and they did find that a violation had occurred, and then they then delayed a decision on fines until this month. And last week they imposed a $5,000 fine on Grand Island Resources, with the caveat that if the system fails or if there's continued non-compliance, then the fine could be increased to $17,000. At the same time as the violations are occurring, and this is where my office really comes into this process, we are looking at permit revisions that were sent by Grand Island Resources to the state, and we're trying to determine what their next steps are, and I'll get into more detail on that after we talk to Aaron. You ready to jump in? Let me stop sharing.
Thank you. I'll share my screen here too. So as Jesse said, my name is Erin Dodge, and I work for Boulder County Public Health, and I'm the water quality coordinator. And I feel like, you know, this meeting for me is really about also hearing from you all, the community, and trying to understand what your needs are. As Jesse very nicely laid out a high level of what the issues have been up at the mine. And, you know, they've got a very long history. I think I've seen records dating back well into the 50s, and I'm sure that's just where the regulators started. So I'm sure it goes back even further than that. So let me put this in present mode here really quick. So can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, Aaron, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So that's kind of why I put that first bullet when I think about what is public health's role, local public health, so Boulder County Public Health specifically, what's our role in this event, in this situation? And so the first thing I really want to make sure is that we're understanding the community's needs and ensuring that they're going to be addressed by the regulatory partners. Because as you've heard with what Jesse was presenting, there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen. So we've got the Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety, we've got the State Health Department, their Water Quality Control Division, and Community Planning and Permitting will have a regulatory type process in a review that will happen. And, you know, as the local public health agency, we don't really have a regulatory authority in this situation. I'll talk a little bit about some sort of broad authority that public health might have, but I feel like our best option is to, and I want feedback on this again during the question and answer period, is really to help bridge the community and the boots on the ground and the local perspective, and ensuring that our needs are being met for being the folks that are in the local watershed, that our needs are being met through the regulatory process. Additionally, we want to make sure, you know, private wells are unregulated when it comes, once they're drilled and installed. The homeowners are really the ones that are responsible for ensuring the safety of their drinking water and monitoring the quality of that. And the local, you know, the state doesn't regulate that, and it really falls to local public health agencies to provide some guidance and to well owners around testing, and then helping to understand the testing results. I will say with wells, even with, you know, recently you may have seen in some of the news around the PFAS, we call them, the what you find in the firefighting foam that is contaminating water sources. And we've had a couple communities in Boulder County that have found their wells to be contaminated with that. And I just think that's an example of how public health can integrate, local public health can integrate to the community in helping support and understand, making sure people are getting those testing results, and you know, getting you to resources if there's issues. And I think the other connection there, and this is something that we have been leaning on Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety, because my team is small. And so honestly, if we need to increase capacity in our team, we would have to really look for funding opportunities to do that. But to really lean on some of these state partners who have in-house toxicologists and in-house hydrologic teams that can help really understand. The other question is, where is the contamination coming from that we might be finding in a private drinking water well? So really mapping it so that we have clear and solid data to understand if that is a connection. You know, the wells in mountain communities we find all sorts of interesting things in them. I know I worked a couple years ago up in the Wonderview area around a little pocket of wells that were having a high uranium, you know, we never found a source, and it just seemed to be naturally occurring. So if you don't test your water, you don't know what's in it. And then the question is, well, where is it coming from? So collaborating together with the community, hopefully we can understand those test results collaboratively. And then I put a comment in there about monitoring the watershed, because I do think that there's an assumption that the county is actively testing and sampling the water all throughout the county. And that is actually not the case. We do not have any water quality monitoring that we do just generally throughout the watershed. We really collaborate with partners to understand the data. With the exception of, there are a few, like the Cardinal Mill mine, I believe, is what Parks and Open Space owns. And we are the owners of that discharge permit, and there's some monitoring in very isolated situations like that we're doing. But for example, the city of Boulder is up in this neck of the woods and monitoring that watershed frequently, because it drains directly into their drinking water. So it's partners like the city of Boulder that are important here too, because they're going to have the history of the data that will help us. And in fact, it has been informative in helping them sort of navigate what's happening at the mine and understanding what the impacts could be to their drinking water supply. So now again, I feel like this is an area where we need to understand what the need is, where the gaps are in the data, and take back up, you know, the information that we hear from you all as community needs, and assess if this is a gap that the county needs to, you know, help fill, or can we ask for this through the regulatory process? You know, all of those questions I think are open for discussion, but just wanted to make sure that it's clear that unfortunately, as much as I would love to have a grand water quality monitoring program, it's just not something that is happening at this time in the watershed, with us actually out, the county staff actually out sampling the stream in-stream flows. And then the other role I really feel like we can help is just helping to clarify and make sure everybody knows who to go to, who can help them, who it's best to report to. And it might just be that Boulder County Public Health is the one that helps that conduit when there, you know, environmental health concerns, and maybe we connect you with the right person. But you know, we also do want to have you consider, you know, give you the tools to reach out to the right people so you can get answers as quickly as possible. So with that said, I do want to point out that the one enforcement tool that Boulder County Public Health and the county itself does have is that we are a regulatory entity when it comes to stormwater. So every time it rains or that snow melts and you live somewhere that has curb and gutter or an open ditch, all of that water is feeding directly back to our streams and creeks and rivers and reservoirs without getting treated. It's not like when it goes down our sink, it goes to the wastewater treatment plant or your septic system and gets nicely treated before it's returned to its original environment. And we have, you know, we're regulated as well as the regulator in this arena. We're regulated as a county by the EPA and the State Health Department, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And one of the programs we have is our illicit discharge detection and elimination program. So essentially it says anything that is not rainwater or snow melt that makes it into a water conveyance structure or into a waters of the state. So a creek, an ephemeral little stream, a lateral to a creek, that can all be kind of considered these waters of the state. We have the ability to enforce. So currently, since the mine is under this discharge permit, they're the ones that really hold, you know, the state health department and the Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety are the primacy. They have the regulatory authority. They have them under a direct permit. So their permit is very similar to what our stormwater quality program would be able to enforce. But something that we're definitely keeping an eye on as we navigate through this enforcement process. What are the options for the county? And where are we best suited to help support this? Now, I did want to share, this is a screenshot of our website, and I believe we'll make sure that we'll share out links and contacts and a page or something at the end of this so you have it all. But we have this little orange button, so when you go to our link, you can report a concern. So if you're concerned about something or you've noticed something in your watershed and it's not an emergency, I highly recommend going on here. This is how to let us know. If something's discharging or potentially could discharge, it's not an immediate emergent threat, this is a great way to get in touch with us. Now, obviously, if it's a full-blown emergency, please call 911 if somebody's life or health is at risk. But there's another number that's out there. This is a way that you can raise something that's kind of in between, like, this can wait till the next business day, but nobody's life is at risk. And you can contact county dispatch and make a non-emergency report. And we have staff at Boulder County Public Health in the Environmental Health Division that carry a pager 24/7. And when there's a threat to the environment or a restaurant fire, because we also do that too, or an air quality issue, our staff is prepared to respond to those 24/7. So if you come home one night and, you know, there's a sheen on the creek and it's concerning and maybe an odor, calling, but maybe doesn't need 911, but calling county dispatch and letting them know, and we can head out and get eyes on it quicker than probably any other agency that's involved in this response. So just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that as well. And so I think with that, I'll pass it back to Jesse to talk more about the role of our community planning and permitting department. I just have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
I had the same problem, Aaron.
Okay, here we go. I found it. There, stop sharing. Okay.
Let me get back to my presentation. Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, so went over that, went over where we are now, and thank you, Aaron, for the overview of public health. And so I want to give a little bit of overview of community planning and permitting and what our role is in this. And as Aaron noted, we do have regulatory authority over land use in the county. And so what our role is here is figuring out, does the activity at the Caribou Cross Mine fit within permitted land use codes for the county? And then also what restrictions, what caveats can we put on that approval to make sure that they operate safely within both state and federal requirements, but also anything where we are concerned, for example, about transportation networks, about water, about air quality, those sorts of things we can actually add as conditions on their approval for this use. And so there are some questions about this in the Q&A we received, and so I want to go into a little bit of detail to just say that the use of the mine as it is now is approved, and it was approved in a 2008 special use review that resulted in a development agreement that outlined what how the mine could operate, including things like the number of truck trips and the amount of ore that could be removed from the mines over a year period. And what we're looking at now is, and I mentioned before, the permitting process is going forward, and that has to do with a review that's resulted in a determination that a substantial modification is required because of the mine update, or I'm sorry, the permit update that the mine is undergoing right now, as well as a number of other issues within the existing special use permit. And this is a thing that happens quite often with complicated special use reviews and development agreements, that over time they change and they need to be modified. And so this is not in response to the water quality permit violation. This is or the discharge permit violation. This is a response to changes in what's happening at the mine. I noted here that we could also pursue a new special use review, and that has to do with a question that we are still exploring, and that is whether there was for a 5-year period, if activity at the mine was suspended. Basically, did they stop work at the mine for 5 years? And if they did, then under the special use agreement as it is now, they would need to come back in for a new special use review. We're still determining that, but at this stage, the mine operator is planning to come to our office or virtually have a pre-application meeting for a substantial modification on May 16th of this year. And that's the first step in that process of review. And that process does have a public engagement element. And I wanted to note here that one of the things that we're committed to is coordinating communication with the town of Nederland so that you're all aware as we move along, so that you're aware of any public meetings that occur, the public hearing before the commissioners, the planning commission. Those meetings would be noticed so that you could attend, you can ask questions, and you'd have a role in that process. And we do have a comment period along with that. So there's opportunity for engagement as we get through this, and we really, as Aaron mentioned, we want to talk about this a bit now, but we also want to make sure that in the future, everyone who lives downstream of the mine, which is most of us, will have an opportunity to engage on this topic. So will mining continue? At this time, there's no underground mining occurring. There's still a cease and desist order in place. The water treatment system needs to be tested and fully approved before any mining can continue. And that decision is made by the DRMS. Then we will, as I said, go through a land use permitting process for the existing new state permit. With that, I actually, my next slide says questions, but I did want to skip to the end here and actually highlight something that Aaron mentioned, and that is this who to contact question. And why we're highlighting this is I think there are so many players in regulation of this, and that includes, for potential mining violations, there's the Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety, and I put their direct info email address, and then Aaron found actually that link there actually takes you to a complaint form. So if you have a complaint about this mine or about any other mining related questions, that's where you want to send comments about mining violations. Concerns about water quality, this is a place where I think reaching out to a lot of different people would be helpful. Reaching out to DRMS, reaching out to Boulder County Public Works for transportation issues, but also public health and CDPHE, the Department of Public Health and Environment. All places you can reach out to for concerns about water quality. And then again, land use issues, and also just anything. I'm happy to answer questions. Ask me anything. So what I'm committed to here is directing your question to the right people. So if you are unsure who needs to hear a concern you have, get in touch, and we can get that sent to the right people. So with that, I'll leave this up, but well, actually, what I probably will do is send this along to Miranda so that she can share this out. But I'm going to stop sharing and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse and Aaron. Appreciate it. So just kind of for clarification for everyone here, as Mayor Larson noted, we did break the questions up into categories. I'm going to try to hit about 4 questions per category and then circle back to any if we've got time. When it comes to county oversight and permitting, Jesse, you answered a large chunk of those, but I did see people kind of trickle in as you were talking. So I'd love to just revisit first the development agreement that currently exists. Can you tell us, when did that first review take place, and will there be a review every 5 years on that?
Yeah, sure. So the original development agreement it started the negotiations on that started in 2008. It wasn't finalized until 2011, and there is not actually a required review every 5 years. So that is not something that gets reviewed every 5 years. What we look for is changes in status. So if the mine gets a new permit, or if the mining company changes hands, we'll contact them and say, does this change does this change the development agreement? We do have the authority to review it on a regular basis, but in most cases, these special use reviews don't change over time. As long as they are sticking with their requirements, we don't see a lot of change. And I think this is maybe a little bit inside baseball maybe with our department, but we operate on a complaint basis. And so we don't actually monitor land uses. What we, because sort of like Aaron's team, I have 2 code compliance specialists for the entire county. And so trying to monitor all of the code compliance issues across that space would be difficult without the assistance of our residents. And so we rely on you to help us monitor all of these uses.
Perfect, thanks. So you kind of alluded to this though. Can the mine expand the scope of their current permit? And if so, what would they be able to do in the future?
So that's sort of a hard question to answer. They have the right to seek a permit from the state that would allow them to mine more material and mine a larger area. That's anyone who owns land that can be mined can seek that. They would have to meet all of the requirements of a state permit that would allow them to mine a larger area, which has a lot more requirements about safety, about reclamation, and about water quality and discharge permitting. They would also need to get a land use permit from us that would change. And so that would open up a whole new special use review process if they expanded significantly.
Thank you. So earlier tonight, you had mentioned kind of the minor violation. Can you kind of designate what is considered a minor violation versus a major violation?
Luckily, I don't know the answer to that question. That's really the state that makes that determination. And I think it has to do with the significance of the discharge, the time it takes. But Aaron, you may know some answer to that.
Yeah, so sometimes, like missing a deadline or, like they didn't do like their owner change paperwork in a timely manner could be more in the classification of minor violation. And I think, I am not really prepared to talk about the specific violations tonight. I think understanding the community's concerns and what information you want, and then we can get the real people who are more on top of all of the details and the regulatory entity maybe to come back and talk more about it. But I think there's a history there of that, maybe not always sharing information right away. And I think we just need to understand the whole picture of all the violations in totality to, as we move forward and making sure that as a community, we're feeling confident in the mine continuing operation, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. One kind of very specific question is, will the county request that DRMS designate the mine as a designated mining operation based on the heavy metal pollution issues that were identified in that cease and desist order?
That's not something we've contemplated yet, but we're happy to explore that question.
Okay. I think that's, again, you've covered a lot of the permitting questions, so I'm going to skip to environmental concerns, which may be a little more you, Aaron, but we'll see. Yeah. First question is, what is to prevent the pollution of our watershed from acid mine drainage, which is used in toxic heavy metal mining?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that's all throughout the mountains of the county, right? I mean, it was just a few years ago that Middle Boulder Creek started flowing orange because there was a old adit that started seeping, and we worked actually with Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety to come out and secure that that entrance to that mine and make sure that it wouldn't continue to leach that fantastic orange color into our creek. So I think, the hope is that through the regulatory process, the mine will come into compliance. They've installed this, improved their water treatment system. And that should really be what's processing and treating all of the water that's leaving and then is discharging a, discharge water into Coontrack Creek that is within the permit compliance. And that is what is set, those parameters of what the discharge can be is what's set by the Water Quality Control Division at the State Health Department. So that's ultimately the goal. So, I mean, I think it's going to take relationships with the mine themselves and just making sure that we're building that, that partnership with them and understanding and the regulatory agencies.
Are there other agencies who are taking samples during water samples, or is Grand Island Resources the only one? And if it is just them, who else verifies those?
Yeah. Yep. Good question. They are the ones that pull the samples. Now, during inspections, they are, do have inspections periodically usually on a schedule. Sometimes they're unannounced. I'm not really sure how the state does that, but they would come up and they likely could sample as well, just as a, parameter check and making sure things are within. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the city of Boulder does some monitoring in that area of the watershed because it is their drinking water. So they have a different level of stakeholdership.
Do you know, so is the city doing sampling as well? And if so, how often?
I'm not aware of what their schedule is for sampling, but I do know it's throughout the year. It's not like a one time a year thing. I do think I want to say it's maybe quarterly, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay. And wondering then this, I think one person had asked if the water is tested for oil contaminants. That was an area of concern. Do you know that?
That is a parameter that is required in their discharge permit, I do believe.
Some concerns too are, what systems are in place to prevent an environmental disaster like those that have happened in other parts of Colorado. An example being the 2015 Gold King Mine wastewater spill.
Yeah, that's another really big question, and I don't know that there's a one solution for that. And I think again, the role for the county can really just be to hopefully develop some relationships and make sure that our regulatory partners are giving this, they're regulating the entire state of Colorado. And, that's a big, there's a lot of mining happening throughout the state of Colorado. And so making sure that we're getting the attention that this one deserves and that its oversight is quality and being involved in the communications on a more timely manner than maybe in the past, and just sort of helping bridge that state level regulatory oversight with the local piece, I think could be helpful. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the mine and making sure that they're following through on their requirements and doing things safely. And just going to stop there.
My internet gets a little unstable at times when my camera automatically turns itself off. So
no worries.
So come and go. Wondering then, has Grand Island Resources submitted a detailed plan for cleanup that's needed? And if so, where could people access that plan?
That would be a really good question for Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety and probably the state. They're the ones that would be getting these, they're the ones that have issued the cease and desist, and they're the ones that will get these compliance, path to compliance plans that their corrective action plans are waiting for. I do believe, I think like the February 28th is one of the deadlines. So I believe we are meeting frequently with these agencies to, usually right in between deadlines. And so we'll be meeting here again, I believe in early April to get an update. And the mine has, been trying to comply. They've been submitting some things and in contact. And as I think we've mentioned, that water treatment system is in place and we're, waiting on some sampling results. So, but unfortunately that is a better question for those other agencies.
Okay, and this is kind of a larger, like a big picture type question, but is there a comprehensive water analysis program that could be used to proactively identify contaminants in the watershed before we hit a point of crisis?
That's a good question. And I don't know, I feel like that would be a better question for the mine operators themselves. You know, being at that point of control is really where things start, right? Once it's down, like if I was monitoring 2 miles downstream, that's a little too late. We really need to make sure that the operations are doing what they need to be doing to prevent mishaps and releases and, you know, control points at the source of the contamination. I also did want to backtrack to the previous question. The records for Water Quality Control Division and the Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety are available online. If you have a little time to scan through, I can help share some information that will make searching for these, like with permit numbers and stuff, that will help make searching for these a little bit easier because it's takes a minute to learn to navigate it.
Yes.
Great, that would be great. Is the county at all concerned about fire, or has that been added to maybe the list of concerns when it comes to the mines operations and the potential risk for wildfire given their operations?
I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. When a use, any of these uses that's a little bit more intensive on the landscape is approved, we, you know, they have to have fire control plans both in the mine and in the surface areas. So that would be something we would review and we would require when they come back in for the substantial modification.
Right. So I'm gonna move to traffic and transportation. One question is, did the operators on the mine, did they submit a revised transportation plan? And again, if so, where could that be accessed?
So there hasn't been a revised transportation plan yet because there hasn't been a revision to the current permit. So, and I think that this may be taking a step back in the process. Maybe I should have mentioned it before, but there's been a lot of concern and confusion about what exactly the current permit from the state and the current land use approval from Boulder County allow the mine to do. Right now, they are operating within both the original state permit and the 2008 special use agreement and development agreement from 2011 that defines the number of trips they're allowed to take, the amount of ore they're allowed to remove from the ground. And so, you know, as long as they're remaining under those caps, they have, you know, they don't need to submit a new plan. But with a substantial revision or a substantial modification, they'll be required to have a transportation plan. And our access and engineering team, which is in the community planning and permitting department, works closely with our public works department to ensure that the number of trips can be handled by the road, and if it can't be handled by the road, then they may be required to make updates to the road in order to make it safer and to make it particularly for residents that use that road. And as a frequent enjoyer of the Caribou skiing area, I totally get that a lot of people have concerns about that road and the safety.
Yeah, and I think, Jesse, you kind of just tapped on into it. There were quite a few questions we received just about the road itself, feeling like it's already a dangerous road. You've got additional traffic. What can be done about the speeding, the dust and noise pollution, and just generally the road erosion? So it sounds like in an update, or if there was some sort of change in plan, they could be held financially accountable. But is there anything else?
So currently, if you're seeing degradation, speeding, degradation of the road surface, speeding, those sorts of issues that are increasing over what was there before, I encourage you to contact Public Works. The Road Maintenance Division has some really great people who will respond and who can try to address the maintenance question. And they can address things like speeding through signage. And if we're continuing to see that after we've updated signs, after we've fixed road issues, that's absolutely something we can talk to the mine about. Hey, we're continuing to see issues. But also, you know, it's not always possible to tell an employee of the mine from someone who's just driving on the road to go do something else. So there is some give and take there, but the more we're aware of issues and the more those issues are reported to our departments, the more we can address them. So please, if you're experiencing that, get in touch with Public Works, and we can do something about it.
So in connecting with Public Works, one question here is, would they maybe decide if they wanted to widen Road 126 West so that they could stay on the ridge top, or make some sort of adjustments to roadways upon receiving those complaints?
Yeah, I saw that question, and to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I'd have to do some more research. I'd have to talk to Public Works about that, and I don't know anything about 126. But I do know that with limited budgets, the chances of opening a new road or upgrading an existing road, if there is already an existing road that could handle that traffic, it doesn't seem like likely in this case. That's just my personal opinion, though.
Again, this is a little more hypothetical, but say, you know, there was concern about damage to the roadway, but we're talking even into the town of Nederland itself and the roundabout. Would the mine be accountable for that? Or are we looking kind of solely at just Caribou Road that they would be, because we know that that's an access point?
We, you know, in the review process, I think, and this is why I really want to bring the town into the review process as we go along. I think there are ways that we can try to address that. But again, it is hard to map damage directly to one user or another user. Again, that roundabout gets a lot of traffic year round in all weather conditions, and so it's hard to say it's one user or another.
Okay, great. So notification was another big area of concern, and just kind of wondering, what can the county implement notification wise, especially those who are downstream, to alert them to any sort of violation or issue? And originally it's kind of that 200-foot marker, but is it possible to expand that even further?
So, and Aaron may have some thoughts on this. We're interested in hearing about notification opportunities from the public. That 200-foot notification boundary, I think, is a state level rule. We, you know, generally the Community Planning and Permitting Department, our notification boundary is 1,500 feet from the boundary of a property where there's an issue. But the notification, we're happy to discuss alternative notification methods.
Cool. Yeah, because I think one thought is like, treat it the way, you know, land use applications, building permits, vacation rentals, that anyone who is considered an affected neighbor gets that, or some ways that town could help to push the message out. I think we're definitely interested in our different avenues, and so I'm looking probably further communication. And that's the last of the questions we received in writing. So thank you for that. I'm going to unmute Mayor Larson here. So I think we can go to verbal comments.
Thank you, Miranda, and yeah, thank you, Jesse. You know, thanks. Oh, and sorry. Oh, I just Jesse, Aaron.
We did all the ones that we did all the questions in question and answer. I just want to verify to the public anyone we received through that chat. So I imagine at this point in time we could move to people unmuting themselves and treating it as public comment if you'd like to go that route.
I think we should. Yeah, that actually went much quicker than I anticipated. So, this is not a town public meeting or any way, shape, or form, but we do want to give as many people a chance to speak as possible. So we're going to try and limit everyone to 3 minutes of public comment. And to do that, in our usual meetings, it's catch our attention somehow. In the WebEx system, you can raise your hand, and I keep an eye open for that. You can get on video and start waving around. You can lift up your pet dog and shake their paws so that we catch our attention. Somehow let us know that you want to speak. You can also, if you want to speak, you could put in the Q&A that you would like to, and then Miranda can help monitor that and let us know that any particular person would like to speak. Just pop on, let us know your name. Let us know, if you want to identify where you live in the area, that would be great, not necessary. And then you can either ask questions of our Boulder County guests, or you could just kind of give a comment, things you want them to know. So I'm going to throw this open and start scanning the video and the hand raising and all of that to try and see if anyone would like to speak. So the floor for the next hour or so is everyone's.
Trustee Corvin, you're unmuted if you had a question. I saw you came
did.
on. Yeah, go ahead.
There we go.
Okay, I had a question, two questions. One was, there's been a lot of attention on the water, rightfully so, but is there any controlling of the air pollution or soil contamination that could occur in this land? I mean, even though they may own it, they're not necessarily allowed to contaminate the soil, probably, right? And also with air pollution, most mines do create a bit of that, and that does flow downwind. Is there any control on that? That was my one question. And then my second question was if you would go into a little more detail about what the expansion is that they're planning, that they're coming back in May for a new special review use. And I'm curious about what is in that plan. Are they expanding their acreage of the operation significantly? And is there a spot that we can look to see the lines of that expansion to know exactly where it's going? That's it. Thank you. I'm Tanya, by the way, and I am a trustee currently of the town of Nederland.
Thank you for the questions, Tanya. And Aaron, I'm not sure if you know the answers to the air pollution question.
I can, air quality is not my main program, but we in environmental health dabble a little bit all over the place. And I definitely think that as this moves forward, pulling in my colleague, Bill Hayes, who's our air quality coordinator, so my counterpart in air, to help with some of this. And I think that's something we would definitely want to monitor and understand. And as Jesse had mentioned earlier, through the county's process, we will have the ability, we are due referrals at public health for all county processes. And so I will be working really closely with our air quality coordinator to make sure that we're addressing any concerns there.
And then in terms of soil contamination, there are a couple different avenues for that. First of all, and there have been comments about this in the past about oil and diesel and other either hydrocarbons or surfactants being dumped on the ground. Those usually get addressed through violation notices from the state. However, there are avenues that we can address if we are aware, and there, like I said, there have been previous reports. So that might be something where we would work with public health and ask, like, is there something we can do about spill kits or something like that on site to deal with that? And then the longer term view, there are some very specific requirements related to subsurface mining approvals in Boulder County. And the biggest one that gets its own bullet point in the code is they must have a reclamation plan filed with the state. And the state does a pretty good job as far as state regulations go and regulating long-term uses like this in requiring businesses who operate mines to reclaim the spaces. So they would work on ways to, return trees, grass, all that sort of stuff to that area after the mining is complete. safely closing the mine portals, those sorts of things. So not only can we address the ongoing potential pollution during the use, we also have the ability to enforce the reclamation at the end of the process. Then in terms of your question of a little bit more about what they're proposing that's resulting in this major modification, couple things. One, there were a number of items that were included in the approval for the original special use review that had a timeline. They said within X number of years, we're going to build this. That timeline has passed. They're still proposing to build those things, or they're proposing to modify and then build those facilities on the property. And so we're saying that's a major modification, a substantial modification. You need to come in and review your approval. And then the other part of it is, and you all probably know this better than I do, there was a tunnel collapse in one of the mines adjacent to their mining area that caused a pipe burst back a number of years ago. The Caribou and Cross mine owner went in, fixed it, and then to be able to monitor and manage that, they actually need to expand their mining area. So that's that expansion of the mining area right now. It's really to address the fact that they had to go in and address a mine collapse, or tunnel collapse, I should say.
And if I could just add one other thing to your question, Tanya, I really want to go back to that. Building collaboration with the mine, I think, is really going to be in our best interest. And I say that because the state partners that we have are, based on proximity, it's harder for them to have that boots on the ground oversight. And I really do think that by developing a relationship so they know who to call if something's happening, they know who the players are, they have a face to the name, they know how to get in touch with us, can be really beneficial in sort of, we were talking about like, well, what's the notification system and how do we know what's happening? And the earlier everybody knows something, the better. The sooner that we can push out public information, the better. So I feel like, as Jesse has mentioned a couple times too, like we need to go back and get some direction around some of these and how's the county going to engage in this process. And I really will be advocating that. I think that relationship building is going to be important so that we have faster firsthand knowledge of what's happening at the mine. And so I just wanted to share that as a piece that I feel is really important as a regulator to know who you're regulating.
Great. Thank you so much. I just wanted to, really quick, when you talked about reclaiming after mining operations is done, is there any anticipated end to this? Or, because don't they just mine until infinity?
They don't mine until infinity. They can. They totally can. But most of the time they don't. And I think as an example of a both the potential, but also the time it takes to do this. If you've ever driving west on Highway 7 out of Lyons, you pass that large mining face, surface mining face. That is actually a property that they have stopped mining. They stopped mining actually before the flood in 2013. And there were some land ownership issues that led to delays, but they actually are in the process of negotiating the final steps of reclaiming that area. And so there is a time horizon on all of these mines. I'm not a mining expert, and so I don't know how they make that calculation, how they make that decision, but they are bound by the state to reclaim that land.
Great. Thank you so much for coming here and answering the questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for those good questions, Tanya. I see some hands going up here, so we'll go first to Stacy Johns, who had his hand up first, and Dr. Garrett Rue, you'll be next on, you're on deck. So Stacy Johns, the floor is yours. And I think if you are called in via your phone, you may need to hit *6 to unmute yourself on the WebEx platform. Because Stacy, I'm still seeing you.
Yeah, you'll need to, I'll just send an invite to unmute Stacy, so hopefully you're seeing that.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go, Stacy.
Unfortunately, Stacy, it doesn't sound like we can hear you. If you wanted to type your question in the Q&A box, though, I'm happy to ask it on your behalf.
In the meanwhile, can we unmute Dr. Garrett Rue and
Yeah, I actually
have
did
his question?
unlock it, so people should be able to unmute themselves, but.
Thank you.
Dr. Rue.
For me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Garrett Rue. I am a longtime resident of Boulder and a researcher on the topic of acid mine drainage. So obviously this press kind of caught my attention back in November. And I felt kind of alarmed because, I'm used to hearing about this in sort of high alpine systems, sort of in areas that aren't so populated. And as I continue to sort of become informed of this issue, I become a little bit more alarmed to, read sort of a series of sort of cease and desist orders and, in my mind, what sounds to be habitual discharges that exceed aquatic life standards. And, now there is obviously community interest, but, in some ways this feels like we're trying to put the genie back in the bottle here where it, some of this could have been a little bit more forthwith and shared. And I think people have a right to that information. And I think the press has inflamed this tension, but that is also a symptom that people kind of felt surprised by that, and I count myself included in that. And as I get more information, I hear these things like, there's good faith and efforts like this, but there was ample opportunity to install this filtration system before mid-January, before bad press, captured sort of the public imagination. So I have a hard time sort of, hearing that and saying, well, that's evidence that, there is action. This action to me feels like it was put into place well after, when it could have, because many months went by where this discharge was occurring, and to find out in hindsight is frustrating to me. And I feel somewhat taken aback by that. And then, more information, I find out that there is, monthly sampling looking at sort of, metals into Boulder's watershed. Now, monthly sampling is great if you're trying to look at sort of, just basic trends. But if you're trying to resolve inputs of metals, you really need more information. And like a lot more sampling could be occurring to kind of assuage the public. Data is power. And if you have data that says that this is not a big deal, share that data. People will be interested in that. I think what we're learning now with COVID is that like science can help us and it can assuage our fears. And providing this information to the public would be a great step in kind of making people not so concerned about a problem that they can't so easily, tangibly see. Clear water looks clean, but obviously there can still be a lot of things in there. And, there's a lot of bad tastes in people's mouths in the mountains because the left-hand watershed experienced, a mine input in 2018. And the only reason that was detected was a fish kill. And that was sort of like, again, okay, we're looking backwards. Why did the fish die? Why wasn't there more forthwith information about this? This is what's driving this sort of, outrage. And to me, it's justified to ask these questions. And it's kind of surprising to have this trickle of information coming out that sort of is creating bad press. Obviously people are inflamed by that. And these headlines don't help. And the lack of disclosure doesn't help either. So I'm just trying to advocate in some ways to be a little bit more forthwith about information, because if it's safe and it's fine, then just show us that information. We would feel better about that. Thank you.
I absolutely appreciate that comment. And we, we're interested in increasing both the participation in monitoring programs if we can figure out how to do that. And we're also really interested in increasing communication. So your point is well taken. And I don't know if Aaron, you have anything to add.
No, I agree. I think the communication is going to be key, and moving forward, we definitely hope to be getting better communication from our partners at the state as that we can help, push those messages out. I would be curious if you have thoughts on platform, like, is a website that we're updating helpful? What is a good mechanism for just general updates, like, hey, the state received the corrective action plans, or those sorts of updates, not necessarily, oh, there's a release taking place at the exact moment updates.
I think like a website would be really helpful, and if town could then link to that and receive notifications. We have a series of different ways we could push out messages then from you and kind of take that on ourselves. So perhaps we can connect about what that might look like. And how, again, I do think town staff could play a huge role in pushing out information too.
Yeah, that's great. Love to connect on that.
Thank you, Garrett. Miranda, did you get the question from Stacy? A question?
Yes, sorry, I had it closed. So Stacy asked, I believe there's only a 163,000 financial warranty required by the operators to pay for 2 years of water filtration. What happens if there is a water crisis and the operators walk away and file bankruptcy? What recourse do we have? Who pays for the cleanup? And then he has a secondary question, which I can ask maybe after that one.
Yeah, I don't know that we're the right folks, unfortunately, to answer that question, but I think it's an important question, and we should definitely, as Boulder County, I'm curious for the answer too. So we'll definitely bring that back and can share something like that out through that website we talked about.
Cool. And then Stacey's other question is, can we allocate funds for a monthly water quality testing on Coon Trek Creek so that we can feel that there's more transparency?
Sorry, was that so you could we allocate funds for more testing?
So, yeah, so there's more transparency.
I think that's a definite question that I would bring back, and seeing if that's something that we could do from the county's perspective. At this time, it's not, their discharge permit, their monitoring schedule probably won't change unless that's something that comes out of the corrective measures that move forward. Sorry, I'm trying not to be distracted by my intern in the background. But I definitely think it's worth exploring from the county's perspective. If there's a consultant we could find that could help with that, or talking to some of our partners that are already monitoring that watershed.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have anything to add beyond that, except, it's something that I think we would certainly discuss with the public during any substantial modification work. And it's something that it's a model that has worked other places. That there are Left Hand Creek has a monitoring program that is actually started as a volunteer effort, but received funding from the county at least in order to maintain monitoring. So that's something that we absolutely should explore.
Do you have any other questions from the public? Anyone, the residents? I see a hand up from Trustee Apt.
Thank you for coming, and really appreciate the information. And I think the idea of collaborating with the mine is a great one, and the mine says they want to collaborate. Would hope that will be the case. There's some confusion about what is planned up there. And I think there was a request to build a mill. And, consulting Dr. Google, who's not an expert, about how ore is processed, what I read was that ore is typically leached out of, or the gold is typically leached out of the ore with either cyanide or mercury. And I think that we had information that cyanide was not going to be used, but I think people are really concerned about what are the processes that are being proposed and what are they allowed to do and what is the purpose of a mill. And I also read that smelting sometimes takes place where they take the gold and turn it into a nugget, which requires a lot of heating, which of course raises a concern of fire hazard. So these are some questions that citizens have asked me, and I appreciate any information you might have.
Sure. So any building of a mill or any associated buildings would be subject to that substantial modification review, and that's where we would get into what does this look like, what kind of impacts would there be, what kind of processes would they use, and as you mentioned, the existing approval that did contemplate a mill, but had a timeline on when it could be built, did say that cyanide could not be used in the processing. So had to use alternatives. And I don't have it in front of me, and I don't remember if it also included mercury as something that wasn't allowed to be used. But certainly we would again look at what the process is that they're proposing to be used, and we would take both comments from our environmental health colleagues as well as from the public on what people are comfortable with. Until we see the plans after they're submitted, we can't say what they would use.
Do you have any idea how much in terms of quantity of tailings are allowed up there? And, is there a danger of runoff of chemical waste from tailings?
I don't know off the top of my head what the tailings load is. The way the permit works, they're allowed to produce a certain amount of mine waste each year, in terms of mine waste being that tailings or overburden or any of the unused rock. But my recollection is that most of it has to be removed from the site.
Okay. And then any potential runoff from tailings would be carefully monitored and tested.
Yeah, so that discharge permit covers not just what comes out of the mines, but also what comes off the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. I see another hand up here from Karen Blakemore. Karen.
Hi, I'm a resident of Nederland, and I'm wondering how we can be informed of any reviews where the public can provide input.
Absolutely. From the county's perspective, we are somewhat limited in the scope of where we can send a postcard. But like I said, what our plan is to coordinate with the town so that the word can get out as we start the review process. And we will put it in newspapers. We'll make that information available. But I think the step further that we're taking in this case, other than just informing neighbors, is getting in touch with the town and saying, here's our schedule, here's when we're going to be meeting. Let's make sure that the town has an opportunity to get involved. And that's the land use process. Now, from the state process, I'm not actually confident. I could not tell you what their process is for informing about board meetings, which is where they do most of their public engagement. And as far as I know, they don't actually take public comment during their board meetings, but the public can listen.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I see next hand up is from Scott Papich. Scott.
Hey, Chris, thanks. Scott Papich, I live here in Nederland, and there's been some conversation here this evening about being cooperative with the mine, and I think there's no other way to do it is for everybody to cooperate. We have to coexist. We're all here, right? And we're not going anywhere. But I also want to echo some thoughts that Dr. Garrett passed along a few minutes ago. And I think we have an expectation here in town that the mine and the organization that runs the mine also cooperates with the town. And not really being very open about disclosing past infractions is not cooperating. And I would like to hear more people here in the community speak up about that. I've got a bad feeling about that, and I'll close with that. But thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks for your comment. I mean, I don't know if the town has any comment on that, but we're intent on sharing the information we have when we have it.
I think
Jesse,
that's a
Jesse, I'm sorry, I'm going to break in. Jesse, my remark was not actually pointed at you. It was just to raise awareness. And I know we've got some people from the mine on this call tonight, and I don't mind them hearing me, that our expectation as a town and as concerned citizens here in Nederland, our expectation is that they're more open with the county, the town, the state, and everybody who, we're all stakeholders here too. And we know that the mine feels like they're invested in the town, but I don't really want to hear, and I don't think very many other people want to hear about the money that they feel like they put into our economy. That does not give them permission to soil the area and to drop heavy metals into the water and not say anything about it until they get caught. So being very frank about it, and I'd welcome others to be open about it as well.
Mayor Larson, we have a few more questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, I just saw another hand. Someone's had a hand up here, I know, for a little while, so
sure.
we'll get to those. Because yeah, Scott, I just want to echo, this meeting tonight, or this session tonight, is all about the free flow of information. And I think that's really the goal of everyone here, is to keep information above the table, flowing freely between all the parties. Next hand I saw, before we go to the questions that have shown up on text, is Patricia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Patricia, and I live here in Nederland. And I just wanted to echo some of the comments from Scott. I appreciate what he said, as well as Dr. Rue, excuse me. I found out, just like everybody else, a lot about what was going on in the mine after the fact. I was on a bike ride in the summer and saw a lot of operations starting, and I started looking into what was going on up in the mine, and found out the mine was operating under a previous permit. And from my understanding, and from a lot of the conversation we've had tonight, and with the county and the town, as well as the mine and the state, their operations are very different than the previous operation and the previous plan. And so moving forward, I 100% agree and appreciate everything that the county has said, and really appreciate everything that the Board of Trustees has stated, is that we need better communication. We don't want to find out in the newspaper about a cease and desist order. When I read that as a general member of the public, I think, oh, the mine is shutting down. That's what cease and desist means. And then we learned more about, some of the violations and what that meant. And a lot of it we're learning about after the fact. So moving forward, I really hope that the operators of the mine, many of whom are on here with their attorneys and staff, I hope that they'll be more upfront about what's going on. I hope that as members of the public will have an opportunity to weigh in on any changes that are going on up there. I often laugh with my neighbors about, they're redoing a deck on their property and they have to post a public notice, whereas a mine is starting new operations and expanding and rebuilding tunnels, and we don't see any of that public information. So yes, more information, more transparency, more communication between the state, the county, and the town, even though, yes, the operation is outside of our town limits. So I look forward to that. I did have a question, as opposed to just making some comments, for Jesse. You had mentioned the potential role for the Environmental Protection Agency and all of this. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what role they might play in terms of water quality, water quantity issues, as well as some of the other issues that were mentioned regarding soil health and contamination.
I don't think I mentioned EPA. I think I might have mentioned our environmental health division within Boulder County. I'm not actually aware until, well, I'm not aware of what role EPA plays in active mining monitoring or regulation. I think that's other departments at the state level, and then there may be some federal oversight, but I'm not aware of any. Aaron, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I don't believe it's the EPA. They are involved in, for example, Captain Jack, which is now a declared Superfund site. Somebody had mentioned that earlier when they had a discharge, and the EPA is actually the oversight for that and monitoring and managing the discharge. They're treating that water coming out of the adit, the Big Five adit up there above Ward. Yeah, above Ward. And it had a hiccup, and it discharged acidic drainage right into the creek, and nobody knew until the fish were floating. So it was an extremely unfortunate event, and I do believe measures were put in place to help an earlier notification of that. Some real-time monitoring was created. So.
Thank you, Patricia, and Jesse and Aaron for answering those, and for clarifying where the Big Jack was, Captain Jack. Make sure that was the left-hand one. Miranda, you said we have some questions that came in via the Q&A.
Yes. So the first one is, given all the departments that have a hand in permitting and monitoring in the mine, how does a resident get the bird's eye view of what's going on?
Yeah,
great question.
I think we're all looking for the bird's eye view. It's a lot of papers. I'm hoping that through our communication plan moving forward, perhaps the website or whatever, I think that Boulder County at a minimum needs to probably put up a web page so that residents can go and get that bird's eye view, understand where the compliance issues, a timeline needs to be put on there so people can understand like a high level timeline. Because when you start looking at the state's websites and reading all the documents, it's just 30 pages later and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're like, I don't even know if I comprehended everything I just read. So I think the county can play a role in trying to provide that for now, and try to get that out here as a quicker ask. It's a low-hanging fruit that I think we can get that done. Ask our state partners to help us put that together.
Another question is, where does the tailings and overburden waste that is carried away go?
It's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that. It's something I can find out, and I can try and find out and get some more information on that. I assume it's taken to landfills, but I don't actually know.
Okay. Which newspaper will notices be published in? And specifically, this person has a concern that oftentimes that's in the Daily Camera or Longmont's newspaper and not in the Mountaineer. So will those public notices be coming to the Mountaineer?
I will make sure that we publish in the Mountaineer, only because, as far as I know, the papers of record for the county are the Times Call and the Camera. So I will make sure that whether it be a notice in the paper or both a notice in the paper and reaching out to the town, or just the town, we're going to get word out as best we can to the community through non-traditional means. I think is what we're going to focus on.
One more for you in this chat. Does Boulder County plan to do any regular inspections, or do you simply put full responsibility on DRMS, who are traditionally underfunded?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I feel as though part of that relationship building is, I actually visited this mine quite a few years ago. I kind of like have a gap in my timeline from COVID. I feel like time stopped there. So it feels like just yesterday, but it was quite a few years ago, back when Tom Hendrick was the operator. And we had started sort of down that path of trying to build that relationship and having a better understanding. At that time, the mine was not in operation. They were not operating. And so I hope that through that process, we'll get some eyes on the ground, but I don't know from a regulatory perspective what public health authority would be to conduct inspections. I think that would be something we'd have to, have some internal conversations about, and making sure we understood our authority and what we were actually out there to look at.
Few more coming through here, so I don't know if Mayor Larson, you want to mix it up with a verbal, but I can keep going.
Let's mix it up, because we've had one hand sitting up here from Jim
I'll come
Cowart,
back
and then
to
we'll
you
come
then.
back. Yep, we'll keep cycling back and forth. Jim.
Hi, Chris and everybody. I'm Jim Cowart. I'm a 30-year resident of the Magnolia area. And I'm a professional engineer. I represented Tom Hendricks in the Cross Caribou Mines from 1993 up through his passing in 2020. Personally signed all the permits for the state water quality, the state DRMS, and for the Boulder County land use that Jesse's been talking about. So I have some comments, and I'd be glad to answer any questions, not on behalf of the current owner, because I'm not engaged by them, but I was representing the former owner, so I have a few comments on questions that came up. But my overall comment is, if you ever visited the mine, you would have seen a large sign that Tom Hendricks installed, which says, "Mining with respect for the environment." And this is pretty much what Tom did from the early 70s through his passing in 2020. Mining with respect for the environment. So, in my opinion, his legacy can be continued if the owners and the regulators and the citizens would simply collaborate with one another. And my experience with a lot of other mine sites in the Front Range here and all over the state, including Left Hand, and I did the Captain Jack cleanup, and represented Tom, and so on and so forth. And in my opinion, all these issues are pretty straightforward and can be resolved for the current operation. I haven't seen the future mine plan for this new company, but I would expect that that future mine plan can also be resolved through the state water quality, the state DRMS, and the county land use process. So let's do what Tom Hendricks tried to do for 40 years up there. And two quick comments. Jesse, there's been some questions come up from you and I guess Dr. Rue on the tailings. This may have changed, but the original 2008 land use plan, which I prepared, was what's called a backfill operation. So there would be no discharge, there would be no big tailings ponds, there would be no trucking tailings down the Boulder Canyon. It would have been backfilled 1,000, 1,200 feet underground, but I don't know whether that's the current plan or not. And my second comment is there seems to be sort of a disconnect on a lot of people are concerned, as they should be, about surface water downstream, off-site surface water quality and groundwater quality. But I think in my experience that this is not the responsibility of the mine owner, as long as they are in compliance with their discharge permit at the point of compliance or the property boundary. Once it goes beyond that, then maybe DRMS has some other policies on this that I'm not aware of, but I don't think the owner is responsible for downstream water quality as long as they're in compliance with their permit. So there's the watershed has been mentioned several times. Getting the nonprofits to monitor shed above and below the Cardinal mine would be helpful. Getting the city involved with whatever they're monitoring at Barker Reservoir would be helpful. And I would think that could be done through the current watershed nonprofit. I was previously the president of the Boulder Creek Watershed Initiative, but I'm not anymore. So I think there's a new group involved. So I would encourage everybody to get in touch with them and give them some funding. And I'm sure they could come up with a good plan to do the downstream monitoring. So those are just a few quick comments.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those comments, Jim. Thank you so much. Miranda, I don't see any more hands up, so we'll go back to the written Q&As.
Okay. If the mine can't mill and they can't process ore at this time, what have they been doing since 2008?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, of course. If the mine can't mill and they can't process ore at this time, what have they been doing since 2008?
So they can, and Jim may know this way better than I do, but they can take, processable ore and get it processed other places. They can put it in trucks and take it other places to get processed. And there have been periods during that time since 2008 where they've had to idle the operation for some period of time for various reasons, and that is something that's permitted under their permit. It's permitted under the land use allowance, and it's a common practice amongst especially gold mines as they're trying to match their extraction with the high price of gold.
Thanks. And I know you speak to this a little bit, but many of the mining claims span Caribou Road as well as other county roads. I am concerned about the potential cave-ins and the resulting safety issues. The shoulder of Caribou Road is already eroded away and the collapse of the Idaho Tunnel. Is the county monitoring the safety of the roads and the crossing Caribou mining area?
As far as I know, there's no active monitoring. Again, when the collapse occurred, it wasn't until the collapse occurred that people are aware there was a potential for that collapse. So there is no ongoing monitoring, and I'm not even sure how that would occur. But it's certainly something, if they're going to be mining in and around those roads, which they are, that's something we can certainly discuss with the mine about how to monitor so that there is no, or there's less potential for impacts in the future.
Kind of related to that, I think people are looking for the email address to really like Public Works to for the road and transportation. Is that in your final slide? I can't recall if you threw it in there.
Yeah, do you want me to share it again?
Yeah, share that. That would be great.
Pop that one up, yeah.
Yeah.
Give people lots of chance to copy down the email addresses and websites.
And then I've got two more here, kind of back to that, the backfilling, tailings and discharge, wondering how does that not impact the water quality of everyone downstream? Sorry, let me ask it exactly. If they're backfilling tailings and discharge, how does that not impact the water quality of everyone downstream?
that's well outside of my area of expertise. I don't know if someone who has more experience could answer that question. It's also something we can dig into and get an answer for. No.
Okay. So the last question, and is maybe a great segue, Mayor Larson, to the mine representatives themselves, is how many employees are at the mine? In 2008, the agreement's at 34. Is that the maximum? I don't know, Jesse, if you want to answer that, but we also have mine representatives here who are hoping to just have a few minutes to address some questions as well.
I don't have an answer to that question in front of me.
Mayor Larson, do you want to invite them?
Yeah, I think, Miranda, that is a incredible segue. I know we have Daniel Takami, who's the president of Grand Island Resources here. So Daniel, I mean, I guess we got a question to lead you off on, and then whatever you'd like to add to the conversation this evening. Welcome.
Hello, how are you guys? Can you see me, hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I'll talk a little bit about what we have going on. And I'm not going to answer any questions tonight. I mean, I could get, bombarded with questions, but I will tell you this. What we are doing is we are going to have a question and answer session as soon as early spring hits, summertime. And we'll probably do that at the Caribou Room, where we have residents can come in and can ask us questions. We'll have questions and answers, and we'll have our experts in the field there, so they can actually answer you in a much more correct way than I can. I am not the expert here. However, I would like to state that I am the president of Grand Island Resources, and prior to me becoming the president, Tom Hendricks was the president of Grand Island Resources as well. Many of you guys do not know that. He took over the operation when we came on, and then unfortunately, due to his passing, I became the president of Grand Island Resources. So he was a great friend, and very environmentally conscious, as we are as well. Some things about, we had, as far as our water that was coming out of our mine, we had 11 exceedances out of 400 data points. All of our exceedances were within drinking water standards for the town of Nederland. So that being said, the water coming out of our mines and out were in compliance with drinking water standards. Now, they were out of compliance and we wish they were not. Since then, we have commissioned a new water treatment facility that came online January 10th, and we are currently monitoring the water 24/7. No other mines below us or that I know of are monitoring their water 24/7. And since we've started monitoring our water, we have been 100% in compliance. We have PhD doctorate hydrologists, consultants that we work with, and we have other water class A consultants that we work with. We are very, very concerned about the water coming out of our mines. We drink the water just as you do. Our dogs drink the water. And the reason why we have kind of stepped back a little bit, we were getting bombarded with lies and libel and slander. And, it's not a tit for tat, and we did not feel like we should address these issues to these people. So I sent out a letter to many of you guys, and I think many of you guys received the letter. I don't know. I sent it to the whole town of Nederland. That was some of our, we were just asked to do that. And I wanted to give information, and we will give more information when we do have our question and answer session at the Caribou Room. Let's see. I've been taking notes. You guys have been asking questions. So, all in all, I just would like to say that we look forward to cooperation and working with the town of Nederland and the county of Boulder. I appreciate everyone being on here. I'm listening to the questions and I'm hearing what you have to say. Just know that we, as a company, we're part of Nederland. Even though we're not in the town of Nederland, we live there, we drink the water there, our kids go to school there, and we're very much committed to being part of this community. And I'm very, very, I appreciate all the questions that you have, and I'm listening, and we are listening as a company. So
will you be able to speak to just that last question of how many employees you have?
we have the different employees for different companies. And so the specific number of employees at the mine, I don't have the exact number today. But I appreciate everyone on here, and I'm not going to be taking questions, but that is something that I would like our experts to be taking questions with. So I hope you understand that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There are a few more questions, Mayor Larson, through the chat that I do think maybe Jesse and Aaron can answer.
We've still got, 10 minutes here. So I just want to thank Daniel. Thank you for joining us this evening, and looking forward to that springtime public hearing with the other residents and Grand Island Resources. Miranda, you said we have some other questions.
I have two more. And one, I think maybe Jesse is one that maybe you won't be able to answer, but I'm kind of curious why the cease and desist orders took so long to get in place, considering 2 years of violation. Do you have any insight to that?
I do not. My understanding is that it's a scale question, and it's also what the cease and desist orders cover. So there was a comment about the number of cease and desist orders, and that's the Water Quality Division cease and desist order does not actually stop mining, whereas the DRMS cease and desist order does stop mining. And so I think they have a number of tools that they can access based on the severity of the exceedance. And I would assume that they were utilizing those other tools before they arrived at the cease and desist order.
This is kind of a two-part question, but is the water discharge tested as single location? And what about the water that seeps through the mine? Is it all funneled through a single location?
Aaron, do you the single location? I know that the discharge is tested at a single location, but Aaron may know better.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. Usually a water quality permit has specifications on what parts of the system need to be tested for what, how often. And, sometimes it's just at the end of the line before it's able to be discharged out, or when it's being discharged out into the creek. So it would all be specified in that permit from the Water Quality Control Division. And I don't believe that Department of Reclamation and Mine Safety have any water quality requirements other than you must comply with the state health department's permit sort of language in their permit.
People are really active on the Q&A over here. A couple more. When does Water Quality Division determine if this is a violation of the Clean Water Act? And if that happens, when would fines be assessed?
Yes, good question. So the monitoring of, I'm going to speak generally and not specifically about this property to the best of my ability. So again, this is coming out of the Water Quality Control Division with the State Health Department, and they have a permit to discharge. And in that permit, the parameters are set of the maximum contaminant loads, the maximum contamination that can be allowed to be in the water. And it's all going to be very specific to a watershed. Some watersheds have different pollution diets, or what we call total maximum daily loads on them. And so those permits are very specific to a watershed. And when a discharger violates that, they have their sampling schedule and they have to report all of that to the State Health Department. When they violate that, that's when a notice of violation goes out. And they have a schedule of how you respond to a notice of violation, what happens if you don't respond, and it's a very lengthy procedural process for enforcement, usually in many of these scenarios. And I do think, depending, again, like Jesse was talking earlier about like minor violations versus, critical violations, and all of those are defined within these regulations that the state is using to create these discharge permits and determine what level of action needs to be taken based on the type of violation that's been found. So unfortunately, it's not a super easy answer. It's it's complicated and tied up in thousands of pages of regulation, but hopefully that helps give a little bit of an overview of how that works. Was there more to that question?
No, that was it. And I actually realized the other things that came through were from you, Aaron. So I went ahead and opened up the chat.
Okay, I was trying to share some links.
I appreciate that. So if everyone looks, if you're able to access the chat on your WebEx, Aaron's shared all of these direct links to also what Jesse has on this page here. I'll enter in my contact information. So if there's follow-up questions or you're looking for direct links to things, we're happy to share that. So I'll put that in here too. And I think, Mayor Larson, that appears to be it in the question for now.
We're doing this till the end here. What's left? I just want to reiterate, the contact screen in the chat for questions, things you have an idea 20 minutes from now. Please let us know, get in touch, and we can keep this information going. Jesse, I want to thank you guys for spending a couple of
Mayor Larson, I don't know if it's just me, but you're a little glitchy.
We'll put this on. Oh boy, it's the evening internet.
I'm turning your camera off. Try again. I don't think so. I'll wrap this up.
Okay, Miranda, I'm just saying thank you, everyone. Brings online. Take over.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, no, Aaron and Jesse, thank you so much. And we really appreciate everyone from the public who jumped in and everyone who submitted comments during the meeting and ahead of time. It was really helpful. So this audio recording will be made available on our YouTube channel, which you can get to from our homepage. But tomorrow morning, give us about an hour and we'll get that added to our YouTube page. And if there's further questions, please reach out to town. But Jesse and Aaron, thank you so much for your time this evening and everyone for coming.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.